Hello everyone, welcome back to CBS News. I'm Holly Williams in Kyiv, Ukraine.
And I'm Michelle Miller in New York. Here's a quick recap of some of the big stories we're following. The January jobs report crushes expectations. The U.S. added more than 460,000 new jobs in January, well above what experts predicted. We break down what this means for the economic recovery. Plus, a massive winter storm has knocked out power for more than 300,000 Americans. Now a new deep freeze is moving into the Northeast, threatening roads and power lines this weekend.
And while Russia maintains it has no intention of invading Ukraine, it's not moving its forces away from the border. Now, U.S. officials fear Russia may fake a Ukrainian attack to justify its next military moves.
We believe that Russia would produce a very graphic propaganda video, which would include corpses and actors that would be depicting mourners and images of destroyed locations.
With around 100,000 Russian troops massed on Ukraine's border, the U.S. is warning that Moscow could stage a violent incident and blame Ukrainian forces as a pretext for moving in. The U.S. government says a fake attack could involve military equipment purported to be supplied by the West and explosions, and the pretend victims could be in Russia or Russian-speaking people here in Ukraine. The U.S. has not provided any supporting evidence, but claims by going public it's trying to dissuade Russia before it acts. The U.S. has warned of similar plots before and of Russian disinformation.
Now, this is straight out of the Russian playbook. And they're not fooling us.
One example is a Russian state TV report in 2014 that a 3-year-old child was crucified by Ukrainian forces, now widely thought to be a fabrication. Maria Sahaidak works for Ukraine's government, calling out Russian propaganda.
They want to confuse people and to build this fake reality that doesn't exist.
Here in Kyiv, I sat down with a Ukrainian political analyst, Taras Berezovets, to talk about the politics behind the current crisis. Why do you think Vladimir Putin has moved roughly 100,000 troops to Ukraine's border?
As a former KGB officer and a man who used to be a part of Soviet Empire, at some point he understood that Ukraine and other former Soviet republics could be members of NATO, could be members of European Union. And this is something which scares Mr. Putin. That's why I would say the driving force between what Mr. Putin is doing is his fear.
Is he trying to recreate a Russian empire? Is it that simple?
Saying frankly, yes, just in very short. He wants to restore Soviet Union. He wants to restore Soviet Empire.
He wants to reunite all of these former Soviet republics.
Right.
Under his control again. Is he just using the threat of those troops to try to make Ukraine obedient to Moscow? Or is he serious about invading?
It's also a very good question. I would say that if he sees a window of opportunity to invade, he will do that just very next day. And because he was considering the losses which he can suffer in case of this invasion, he decided to withdraw this time, this very time, which doesn't mean he's not going to withdraw next time. So he would be seeking for a window of opportunities.
The US has been very keen to portray this crisis not as a regional dispute between Russia and Ukraine, but rather as something that pertains to fundamental issues about sovereignty and democracy. Do you think that's true?
I think that Biden administration was absolutely right treating this conflict not as a Ukrainian-Russian conflict. It was a conflict between two worlds and two civilizations, between Western civilization, which Ukraine definitely is a part of, and between Putin's and Xi Jinping's world. Russia is moving towards China, which makes this conflict between two civilizations in the future imminent.
It sounds like you're describing a new Cold War, with Russia and China on one side and the West on the other. Is that right?
Absolutely. I'm talking about new Cold War era. I think this conflict at some point will erupt in well, some very serious military conflict, especially if we are talking about Chinese aggression against Taiwan, especially if we're talking about Putin's intention to take control over Ukraine, Central Asian republics, and whatsoever. So this line of conflict now in 2022 lies here on Ukrainian-Russian border. But in the future, these division lines, they would be much larger, and they would be, unfortunately, much longer. And they will be separating free world from the world of tyranny.
What happens next? It seems like you're saying the US and NATO have been very effective in not giving in to the perceived threat from Russia. Will President Vladimir Putin order his troops back from the Ukrainian border?
Quite possibly. I think because, well, it would be quite costly for him and quite difficult to keep all these troops on the border with Ukraine. So I would say the chances that he will withdraw this time until the next time are very high. So I think he will withdraw his troops from Ukrainian borders in March.
Until the next time, you just
Until
said.
the next time, absolutely. And I think that the next time might be even already this year, by the end of 2022.
Why?
Because basically for Vladimir Putin, this conflict is not over because he didn't reach the targets in this conflict. And he lost this time. And I think he understood that he lost. He needs to keep a pressure on Ukraine all the time, you know. And I think that he still hopes that at some point this pressure will cause chaos within Ukraine, which will ease him invasion.
It seems like you're saying that Ukraine is going to continue to be the front line or demarcation line in this new Cold War that you've described between Russia and the West.
Absolutely, and I would say that Ukraine nowadays is a Berlin of 1960s. We have to put up with this because this is something which is going to last for years, at least until Vladimir Putin is president of Russia. So, which means this conflict is not over. We will see further escalation. We will see more Russian military build-up on our borders, and it could happen any time, any month, and whatsoever.
Taras Berezovets, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a key question in all of this, isn't it, Michelle? What are Vladimir Putin's motivations? Many people here believe the bottom line for him is that he wants a Russian sphere of influence, a kind of extended Russian sphere of influence, whether you call that an empire or a buffer zone. But why? Is it emotional for him? After all, he's a former KGB agent who grew up in the Soviet Union. And, for many Russians, the loss of that empire was humiliating. Is it strategic? Is Vladimir Putin genuinely fearful of the US and its NATO allies? Or is this about domestic politics, and Vladimir Putin's own political legacy? We don't know, but the bottom line, I think, is very clear. Vladimir Putin wants to draw Ukraine away from the West, away from its alliance with the US and back into Moscow's orbit. According to some, he even wants to turn it into a puppet state.
I mean, he came of age in the USSR, certainly, was an agent of the USSR. I'm curious, in your interview, this potential conflict was compared to the next Cold War. When you travel through Ukraine, does it feel like it is on the front lines of the next Cold War?
No, not really. It feels like an increasingly prosperous, young democracy, a very dynamic place. People here, for the most part, are very excited about their future. The people we speak to see that future as part of Europe, as allied with the West. On the other hand, some people also acknowledge that this country is kind of caught by forces beyond its control. And perhaps, as you just heard from Taras Berezovets, on this kind of new demarcation line between the West and Russia.
Sounds like a tale of two mentalities or 2 points of view, you have it. President Putin he's in China today to watch the opening ceremonies of the Olympics and meet with Xi Jinping. How does China fit into the standoff with Western countries and NATO, for that matter?
Well, China and Russia have drawn a lot closer in recent years as they've both become more estranged from the West and sort of at odds with the US. It's really interesting. In this part of the world, you see Russia sort of reasserting itself as a world power in recent years, whether it's here in Ukraine or in Syria. But when you see Vladimir Putin going to Beijing, he really comes across as a kind of a junior partner in that relationship, almost going cap in hand to Beijing to ask for China's support. And I think the bottom line for him there is that if Russia decides to invade Ukraine and is hit with US sanctions, China could be crucial because it could help Russia offset the impact of those sanctions, whether it's banking or supply chain issues.
No doubt, China is definitely a world power, one that is being looked to for nods in all directions. Holly Williams, thank you.